Hi, talking to Dr. Maggie Leysath of the SFA School of Art. And you've been up to what with your art education students here in the COVID era?
Well, after spring break, we had a whole series of opportunities to be in classrooms at Fredonia Elementary and also in the Boys and Girls Club. I had just received IRB approval for research to work with the Boys and Girls Club. And so we had a series of opportunities for my students to be in the classroom with kids, providing art education and instruction. And so with COVID-19, we were no longer able to do that. Also, I had been contacted numerous times by art teacher friends and colleagues who were desperate for something that they could offer their students. And so they were having to provide content online for their students, and it was quite a bit of a workload. So we decided that we would go ahead and provide content online so that students who are learning at home could get that art instruction that they needed. And so my students have been creating tutorial videos, and we've also provided lesson plans attached to that so that art teachers could understand what was being taught, what was being covered, and and maybe even use our assessments. And so we have right now on our YouTube channel, it's SFA Art Education. And YouTube channel, I think we have about 13 videos right now. So that's pretty good. Yeah, and there's some really good tutorials on there. Actually, all of them are very good.
So having your college students who are preparing to be art educators visit these classrooms, the Boys and Girls Club, was going to be, I'm sure, a tremendous help to the art teachers in the organization. Is this video version of the project, do you think, equally helpful to the kids and the professional educators?
Well, I think it's very helpful to the professional educators in that it provides content that they don't have to create themselves. So there were a lot of art teachers who were desperately trying to create videos, tutorials for their students so that they could keep their curriculum going. And for the students who who are actually able to access them, I think that it is extremely useful because they can watch it and then rewatch it, and then they can ask their art teacher for help and, with aspects of it that they may or may not have understood, or want to improve whatever they were able to create. So I think the idea of having a video instruction is actually very useful. Also, these videos are because they are on YouTube, and so they're always going to be accessible. So even when we're not in COVID-19, art teachers can use these videos to provide demonstrations, which is largely how art teachers will provide instruction, is through a demonstration. And so these videos will allow them to use those videos as a demonstration, and then be able to slow that demonstration down and talk about specific aspects of the project and how they're going to go ahead and use it. So, and specific skills that they'll be using for each project.
So necessity was the mother of invention, and in some ways it sounds like the product, if you will, is useful in a different way, maybe even more useful in that it will endure for a long time. The students can go back and rewatch it. You mentioned that the speed can kind of be varied. So it was would you say that sending the students in to work with the children directly was already a form of service learning, and is this still service
Yes.
learning in its current form?
Yeah, well, I'm actually just learning about service learning. So I wasn't really aware. I just happened to be community minded. And then I began an FLT with Dr. Burrows from the education department and started to learn about how my projects really are service learning and how I can more competently uh, provide service learning for my students. And so the projects that we were doing with the Boys and Girls Club were very much service learning because it was very reciprocal. And the Boys and Girls Club had actually approached the art education department asking for help in art education instruction in their program. And so that was in answer to that. When we were able to go into those classrooms, my students, I think they felt like they were not going to get the instruction that they needed. And so this was an opportunity to provide for them a way of responding to crisis. And so this happens all the time in education. Districts and teachers in districts are always called upon to adjust at a drop of a dime. And that is exactly what happened with COVID-19. And so my students are able to go into their job interviews, put on their resumes that they were a part of responding to COVID-19, that they actually provided content already, and that they've already have experience with dealing with a crisis where kids couldn't go to school and they still needed to provide education for them. So my students are able to say that in a case like this, they would be an asset to whatever district they are applying to.
How were could you talk a little more about what the learning goals were for the college students when you began the
Mhm.
semester, and how that
Mhm.
changed or evolved under the crisis circumstances?
For the class that we were going into uh, the school district, we were going into Fredonia and also into Boys and Girls Club. Those were two separate projects. And the going into the Fredonia project was actually a repeat. So with that project, my students were learning about the advantages of integrating art into core subject area. And while Texas considers art a core subject, when we talk about core subject areas, we're talking about tested areas. And so the first year we were able to go into Fredonia, into a third grade classroom, and it was actually just weeks before they took their reading test. And we were able to do a art and literacy project in which students read a book to the third graders, but didn't show them the pictures. And then third graders were imagining what that story might look like. And then our students took their images and their descriptions and they created an artwork that was a synthesis of their group. And then we were able to display that here in the School of Art. And it was very, very successful. And we only did it with one third grade classroom. This year, we were going to go in really, literally, I think it was like 3 weeks before they were scheduled to take their very first reading test. And that's a really big honor for a district to let you in a third grade class before the kids take a test like that for the first time. And so and all third grade teachers sort of insisted that we be in everybody's class. And so we were just beginning to look at that as we came back from spring break. And we were going to continue that project very much the same way we did the first time. And then I was hoping to get data for benchmarks and then final reading scores from their STAR tests. and begin to build some sort of a research in art integration. My students were able to see after actually being in a room with kids and instructing them and being in charge of instructing them in pairs, that how art can actually open up children's curiosity and imagination, all of which they need to become lifelong readers and lifelong learners. With the Boys and Girls Club, that was more of a part of the course that I was teaching this semester. We had a whole component of diversity training in which Ruby Payne's research was a major part, and that was the socioeconomic differences in our country and that show up in our schools. And so we learned about Ruby Payne. We'd already gone through all of that material, and then we were going into the Boys and Girls Club and to provide art instruction, and that was a part of their program to build up their art program. And then we were going to come back and use that experience to discuss further some of the things that we could recognize after learning about the socioeconomic differences that we learned about with Ruby Payne. And that was in anticipation of diversity training and community service or service learning that is scheduled for about 2 years, which of course is now, it'll take a little while. I don't know how long. I think Boys and Girls Club has been pretty busy, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let me go back to the videos themselves, if I may. Can you give us a sense of the range of the subject matter, the projects or the topics that are depicted or treated in the videos?
Sure. Well, we have 2 videos that are very culturally centered. So one is about the history of the tea ceremony in Japan and the raku firing process that the utensils for that ceremony use. And so it's several hundred years old tradition in Japan, and it is something that has taken off and enjoyed several decades of practice here in the United States in terms of the firing process. And so we have a video about that. And then one of my students created a video about Comanche art, both past and then also contemporary. And she introduced several contemporary Comanche artists, and then followed up with an activity in which they recreate one of those arts. We also have just basic skill building, and that's where most of the videos are going to be in perspective. We have one that's on how to take dramatic photographs. It's really popular. And there are a couple of videos that talk about emojis. They're very relevant and they're very to date. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the age of my students and their very intense desire to relate to their students in a way that will help them be more curious and be more excited about the projects that they're designing. So the emoji video was I didn't think it was going to be that interesting, frankly, but there's actually like an entire history about emojis and where they came from and who developed them, and so there's this whole thing about coding, and it's just fascinating. And so and I had no idea any of that. I didn't really I didn't come on the scene until late, I think, with emojis. So
Wow.
yeah, realized there was a whole history behind it.
Now that you've got me interested, can you repeat for everyone watching where to find these videos?
Yes, if you go to YouTube and you put in the search engine SFA Art Education, our channel will come up. And then if you click on videos, all of our videos will be there. The kind of awkward and wonky ones are the ones that I provided. And then the pretty professional and awesome ones are the ones my students did.
Well, the students are sometimes well ahead of us in the technology, I find. Thank you.
I do want to tell you that, and I don't know when this is going to come out, but I do want to tell you that we were supposed to do Art Academy this summer, and we weren't able to do that. And so, but it is a capstone project for our BFA art education students, so they had to have it in order to graduate. And so we are just using this YouTube channel as their way of doing that. So in the month of June, we should probably upload another approximately 40 or more videos, tutorial videos. And so then our YouTube channel will be quite substantial.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, is there anything else that you'd like to say about any of this that I didn't know to ask you?
Mm-hmm. No, I think that that's it. Yeah. The videos that are coming in June are really exciting.
Great. We'll look for them. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us about this. And thank you on behalf of all of the children and educators that are benefiting from all this for your creativity and getting your students equipped and motivated to do what it sounds like is going to be very useful for a long time to come.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.